welcome back to the Q&A session on why doing a PhD. One thing we want to talk about is basically the specifics of doing a PhD in Germany. It was not so much that we received like very specific questions on that, but it was rather more like some implicit misconceptions within the questions that we would like to straighten out before answering the other more concrete questions maybe. So yeah, I think this might be a session where I ask Professor Karl a lot of questions, because he might have the best of the knowledge to compare systems worldwide, but also maybe we can yeah, get some insights on, I don't know, personal experiences from Florian and Tobias from conferences and whatsoever. So maybe Professor Karl, what do you think is the main difference, for example, when comparing the German PhD system with let's say the US system, which is, I think, in everybody's head when they're thinking of PhD.
I fully share your impression. There were a couple of questions, actually many questions, that were very influenced by this Anglo-American UK US type of doing a PhD, where you are a PhD student, meaning you enroll into a study program, you apply for a study program together with hundreds of other people, and then 40 or 50 people are accepted, and then you take courses and you get credit, and sometimes you write a paper, and then at some point you submit a thesis, and that's it. So you're mostly a student. You might even have to take classes, right? That's a very very typical way of doing that at many universities. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not how it works here, right?
Okay. So how does it work here?
Exactly. Here we do not think of PhD candidates, wissenschaftliche Mitarbeiter, scientific collaborators would be the correct term. It's just a mouthful, right? So PhD candidate might be a nice shorter way of doing that. We do not think of them as students, and we do not treat them as students. There are some legal aspects here and there, but basically we think of them as collaborators and as people who are employed to do research, right? So it's extremely atypical in a German PhD, at a German university when you're doing a PhD, it's extremely atypical that you take classes. It happens here and there, and at some places you have to, but then it's a minuscule amount of credits. It's very small compared to the whole workload that you have. So that's already different. The application process is very different. It's very rare at a German university that you have to apply to something like a PhD program, a PhD graduate school, whatever they are called in the US or UK. This very rarely exists. I'm not saying never. There are some places that toy with that experiment, with that idea, and play around with that experiment, but it's extremely atypical. The one person you need to convince and you need to apply to is your advisor, right? So, and you directly talk to the professor, the advisor. I want to do a PhD with you. Let's talk about the topic and let's talk about money, right? Because typically you want money for that, right? So it's very rare that you can provide your own funding for that. So typically you want money. So you need to talk about an employment contract and how to find the money and what the projects are, etc., etc. Now we have a large blog later on about money, so I don't want to go into the details here. But that is the one person you need to convince, right? And you need to talk to that particular person or talk to several of them. But then at the end of the day, that's the person you need to convince. There's no selection board or anything weird like that. That simply doesn't figure into the game, right?
I see.
I think that's the key main difference.
Yeah. So you now talk like about the difference in how a PhD candidate is seen and what his tasks or her tasks are in Germany as compared to the US. Can you say something a little more general about the academic systems in the US and Germany? Is it that I mean, from the US, you know that there's these big university that attract I don't know, the best professors, and you would try to get a spot in exactly that that university. Do you think it is the same in Germany, that you should be careful in what kind of university you choose here?
No, I don't think the university as such matters so much. Sure, the place where you live matters. In that sense, it has a bearing. But what really matters is you need to pick the right research group. And you need to have a good working relationship with your advisor and with your colleagues. And then it doesn't matter so much whether that university is prestigious in some sense or not. The differences between German universities are so much smaller. The variance is so much smaller than between American universities that this doesn't figure so much into the decision. Picking the advisor is the key decision. There's the typical saying, getting a divorce is so much less painful than finding a new advisor, right? You should be much more careful choosing your advisor than your spouse. So
I see.
Be careful there, right?
Okay, so maybe that is the question. How Florian, Tobias, how did you pick your supervisor for the PhD?
Sorry if I interject here. I strongly object to the word supervisor. It's not supervision, it's advising.
Okay.
Formally, you are the boss, yes, but it's more about advising and collaborating rather than supervision. I'm not supervising anybody and checking whether they put the commas in the right places, right?
I see. You might have to correct me once again throughout this interview, but I see the point. I'll try to stick to the word advisor.
Hey, I'm happy to correct people. That's why I picked that job, right?
I see. Okay, again, the question. So how did you pick your advisor? Florian, Tobias, feel free, one of you.
So maybe I start. So for me, that started a bit before my PhD thesis. It started with the master's thesis. So I'm an Austrian guy, so I started in Austria. And there I was at the stage in my master thesis, master studies, that I had to pick a topic for my master thesis. So I was interested in networking. So I went through all research groups talking about if they have topics about networking, wireless systems, and so on. And there wasn't much there, but I got a contact that a new professor will start soon there. Then I contacted that professor and worked with that professor writing my master thesis. And my master thesis then was the motivation doing a PhD there, because in the topic of my master thesis, I realized, okay, I worked now on a very small topic, solved it, but there are a lot of open issues which are interesting, which are very curious for me to get into that, to understand how that works, to write solutions. And that was my main motivation to stay at the same research group doing my PhD there, because I got good impression during the master thesis. And that was my way of doing my PhD, or finding my advisor.
So that seems to be some kind of a theme here, that some people like get to know their advisor later, their later advisor, when they are doing their master thesis. I think Tobias, you said the same thing, right? That you were that you basically stuck with your master thesis advisor and then came back to him afterwards, right?
Yes. So the research group my current advisor was working in at that time, and they joined the Paderborn University at a time when I was still doing master courses. And the topics were quite interesting. So I took all of them, finished all of them, and so I got used to their way of teaching, of interacting with each other, and so on. And I proposed an own topic for a master thesis, which was also accepted. We worked on that for quite a long time, and also published a paper based on that afterwards. And this, I think, gave a very good impression of the way the group is working, how they think about certain aspects, and also how the interaction between the colleagues looks like in the end. And it turned out that this was a valid impression, or a good impression I got at that time.
Cool. Sounds interesting. Okay, yeah, you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to dispel the notion a little bit that people always are stuck in the group where they do their master thesis. I didn't. I switched. Actually, I switched university after my master thesis and went to another university. So that there's no uniform rule there, right? And I actually encourage people at least once, better 2 or 3 times in their career to switch places. You need to look into other groups. You need to get ideas of different working procedures. How are things done is not uniformly done. So there's a lot to say for that.
Okay.
Don't be stuck in one place.
That sounds. I think we can discuss that even more in the next section about prerequisites, maybe, because we got a little bit off track already with the German specifics. So maybe let's come back once more to this specifics. Maybe just one quick question, like how long is a PhD typically in Germany, and then maybe let's make some more advertisement for why someone should pick Germany, or even especially Paderborn for doing their PhD. So first of all, how long does it take usually, Professor Karl?
As long as necessary, as short as possible.
Can you give maybe not the full distribution, but the mean value?
I'd say 4 years is in computer science a fairly typical value. So I've now had, I don't know, something like 15 or so PhDs, graduated PhDs, 15, 16, something like that. And I think one of them was faster than 3 years, but that's unusual. Faster than 3 years is he was really good. He had a very nice topic where this worked. So this is not a common case. Sometimes you have people taking 5 or 6 years. 6 years is really sort of also from legal constraints, an upper limit. You can't really easily go beyond 6 years, and that also at some point it's just over, right? The topic is run dry and it's sucked dry, and then you should just stop.
I see. And now it's the time for some, I don't know, some nice adjectives about Germany, or like something that you would like to point out. Why should you pick Germany and not, I don't know, any other country in Europe, for example?
Well, one strong reason is salary. You are paid a reasonable salary, right? You don't get rich quickly, but you get something. Guys, you correct me, you know that better than I do. 2,000 something after taxes, after social benefits, after health insurance is paid, etc., etc. We pay you, whereas in the US or other places, you pay the university, right? So I think there's a very, very compelling reason for doing that. And the tuition fee here is negligible compared to what you pay in other places.
I see. Yeah, and maybe also one reason would be the health insurance system, which is really good in Germany, I think, in comparison to maybe other countries in Europe. And you have this insurance also for your family typically. So that's maybe also a positive thing to point out. To Florian and Tobias, I'm sorry that I'm somehow splitting or asking the questions to the two of you, but I think you can answer that really nicely. I mean, you have had current exposure to conferences, right? So when you were talking to people doing their PhD in other countries, like international PhD candidates, what was the main differences that you were aware of when talking to these people?
So talking about experience of how they are doing their PhD. So basically PhD programs in different countries. So I have experience with that because my first year of doing my PhD, I started in Austria, which has a similar system like in the US. So you are a PhD student. You get typically contracts for 75% because you are treated as a student. So you have to take courses for some topics, and the salary is not comparable to the salary you get here in Germany. So that is one big motivation for doing a PhD here in Germany, because with the money you get, you can live very good, and it's quite fine. I also have been for 6 months to Hong Kong before starting my PhD at the research group. And there in Hong Kong, the PhD programs are also a bit different. They go also in the direction of like the US style. You're a PhD student. You have to take some courses. I don't know how many. But yeah, there's also this money problem. So people don't get much money there. So that is really a good point here in Germany. So that is my experience I got.
Makes sense.
For my experience, it was mainly about the money. So that the payment seems to be comparable to other countries, very, very, very good in Germany. One other difference was that the other, let's call them PhD students I met on conferences, they had more or less some kind of to-do list from their advisor, which they had to finish until they graduate. And at least for the way I'm working, I'm very free in the things I do or I don't do. And they were also a bit surprised by that, by this level of freedom, at least I have in my daily work.
Okay, so you would consider that as a positive thing, right? Or I don't know, if a person who likes to tick off things, then maybe that's better for you.
It's maybe a very, very personal decision. So I like this free way of working, but for some other, it might be good to have some kind of to-do list they have to finish until some year or so.
Professor Karl?
I'd like to tie that back to an earlier discussion. This highly depends on the research group you're working in, right? There are groups, I do it similarly, with lots of autonomy for the PhD students, but there are also the tick the boxes groups, right? So I think that's orthogonal to German, non-German PhDs. I think that is very individual for the particular groups.
Okay, thanks for that, to making that clear, because I think this should be a section on what is like common for like a German PhD in comparison to other countries, and maybe it's really good to know that, or important to know that there's for sure still many differences from university to university, or even professor to professor.
Group to group, absolutely.
Group to group, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that should conclude this session on German PhD specifics. If there's nothing to add, then we can move on to the next one.